Okay, so today we're going to talk about arc and angle measures. We're going to talk about intersecting chords, secants, and tangents. Okay, so if I have interior intersection lines, so here where these, whoops, I did not mean to do that, but where these two lines intersect are going to be inside of the circle, okay, and that's two secants because they go through the circle. The measure of the angle formed is equal to half the sum of the measure of the intercepted arcs. So that means that measure of angle 1 is going to be 1/2 the measure of the arc AD, or AB, sorry, plus the measure of the arc BC. Okay, the measure of angle 2 there, same thing, it'll be 1/2 the two arcs, so the measure of angle, or the arc AB, plus the measure of the arc CD, or DC. Okay? Alright, so let's do an example here. So here, if I want to find the measure of D, B, and E, so D, B, and E, okay, that is this angle right here. Okay, so that means I'm going to take 1/2 of the sum of the measure of the arc DE plus the measure of the arc AC. Okay, so that's going to be 1/2 times 112 plus 186. So what's that, 298? So that's 1/2 of 298, which is what, 149? Okay, alright, let's do another one here. Okay, so here I've got the measure, I want to find the measure of the arc B, D, and E. So what I'm looking for is this arc here, the measure of this arc. Okay, I know this angle here is 123, so that means, or that was actually supposed to be 128, I think. Okay, there we go. Alright, so what's happening here? So I could take 1/2, the sum of these two arcs is going to be equal to that angle. Okay, so that means that 128 is going to be equal to 1/2 times 73 plus, and let's label this, I don't know, X or Y or something, X. So multiply by 2, so 128 times 2 is going to be what, 256? So 256 is equal to 73 plus X, subtract your 73. So X here is going to be equal to 183. Okay? Alright, let's talk about if one of them is a tangent and the other one is a secant, and the intersection is the point of tangency. Okay, so then the measure of each angle formed is equal to half the measure of its intercepted arc. Okay, so the measure of angle 1 is going to be equal to 1/2 the measure of its intercepted arc. So this would be 1/2 times the measure of the intercepted arc there, so that would be AC and B, measure of angle 2 would be 1/2 times the measure of the arc AB. Okay, so if one's a tangent and then the other is a secant. Okay. All right, let's look here. So if I wanted to find the measure of angle A, B, and E, so what I'm looking for is this angle here, down here, A, B, and E. Okay, so that angle is going to be 1/2 times this measure of this arc here, A, B, and E, which is going to be equal to 308. So 1/2 of 308, which is what, 154? Okay. Alright, so now if there are exterior intersections, okay, so the secants here that we've got exterior intersections. So these angles A are all on the exterior of the circle, but I've got different things going on. This first one is if I have two secants, okay, so if I have two secants here, then the measure of angle A, okay, it's going to be equal to 1/2, okay, 1/2 the measure of the arc CE, okay, minus the measure of the arc BD, okay, so it's going to be 1/2 the measure of the arc CE minus the measure of the arc BD. Okay, that's two secants. Okay, so if I have a secant and a tangent, so here A to B would be a tangent, and A to D would be a secant. Okay, so if I wanted to find measure of angle A, okay, so then it's going to be 1/2 the arc BD, so the measure of the arc BD, minus the measure of the arc BC. So still same happening here. So measure of angle A is going to be equal to 1/2, okay, the measure of the arc BC minus the measure, oops, that's BD, sorry, BD minus the measure of the arc BC. Okay, so here, if I wanted to find the tangents, okay, so it would be 1/2 the measure of BDC, okay, minus the measure of BC. So 1/2 the measure of the arc BDC minus the measure of the arc BC. Okay? Okay, let's do an example here. Okay. So here I know angle A, right there is going to be 56 degrees. Okay, what I want to find is the measure of this arc BC. Okay, so I've got, it's on the outside. Okay, so it's on the outside. My angle is on the outside of my circle. Okay, so it's going to be the measure of angle A is going to be equal to 1/2 the measure of the arc BC, oops, BD, can't get my D's and Z's right today, minus the measure of the arc BC. Okay, I know measure of angle A is going to be 56 degrees. Then it's 1/2 times BD, which is 160, minus the measure of BC, which you could call it X if you wanted to make it a little bit easier. So multiply by 2. So 56 times 2 would be 112. Okay, and subtract 160, so that'll be a negative 48. And then divide by negative, so that'll be a positive. So measure of BC will be equal to a positive 48. Okay, so let's put it all together, maybe with a little bit of algebra. Okay, so here, if I want to find the value of x here, okay, so the intersection is happening inside the circle, okay, so that means that this is going to be, that this measure here is going to be equal to 1/2 times the sum of these two. Okay, so here this is going to be 3x plus 23 is going to be equal to 1/2 times 75 plus 55. So 75 plus 55 is 130. Half of 130 is a 65. Solve for x, so subtract 23, so you're going to get a 42. So 3x will be equal to 42, so x here is going to be equal to a 14. Okay? Alright, let's do another one here. So here we've got a secant and we have a tangent. Okay? So we know that this angle inside here is going to be 23 degrees. So if I find that angle, then I'll be able to find, since I know that angle, I can find that arc, that measure of that arc. So remember, that'll be the measure of this arc. Okay, that angle is equal to 1/2 the measure of this arc. So that means that this angle times 2 is going to be equal to that measure of that arc. Okay, so the measure of that arc there is going to be what? 2 times 23, which is going to be 46. Oops, sorry. Which is going to be a 46. So then I can find this arc. Oops. This arc over here will be 360 minus 46, which will be a 314. So that means 14x minus 22 is going to be equal to 314. So add 22, so you'll get 14x. It's going to be equal to 336. Divide by 14, so x is going to be 24. Okay. Alright, let's do one more. Alright, so here, if measure of the arc AE is equal to 170, so here I have an intersecting angle that's outside, okay, so remember, here I've got two secants, so if the measure of angle AE is 170, so this is going to be equal to 170. The measure of the arc BD here is going to be equal to 5x plus 8. And the angle here is going to be equal to 4x plus 3. Okay, so remember that's going to be equal to, okay, that angle is going to be equal to 1/2, this big one, minus that small one there. Okay, so the angle, so 4x plus 3 is going to be equal to 1/2, the big one, which is 170, minus that 5x plus 8. Okay, so we're going to have 4x plus 3 is equal to 1/2 times 170 minus 5x minus an 8. So multiply by 2, so that's going to be an 8x plus a 6 is going to be equal to a 162, a negative 5x plus a 162. Okay, so add your 5x, so you're going to get a 13x. Subtract your 6, so you're going to get a 156. Sorry, I'm going to have to go over here. So 13x is equal to 156, so divide by 13, so x here is going to be equal to 12. Okay, so it asks for the measure of angle, so it asks for the measure of this angle, so I'm going to go back and plug a 12 in there. So I'm going to say 4 times 12 plus a 3. So that's going to be what, a 51? Alright, so that's using some algebra with our angles. Okay, y'all have a great day.